Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is a coaching call with Charlotte. Charlotte is the mom of 3 kids who are 7, 4, and 3. And she wanted to talk primarily about her 7-year-old's big meltdowns, big prolonged, sometimes aggressive meltdowns, and how she could help him with those and handle them more effectively. And she also had her own struggles with self-regulation, sort of one of those things I think you'll find familiar. It's familiar to a lot of us where you're patient and you're patient and you're patient till you're not. And just some of the other challenges around having 3 active kids. You'll hear me in this episode recommend something that I typically don't recommend. And it was very interesting for me to have this, to be giving her this suggestion, which was for the sensitive child of hers, maybe she need to bring a little less empathy to his meltdowns. And we go into that in a lot of detail, and stick around to the end and you'll be able to hear how that went for her. I just thought it was funny because it's usually the opposite of what I'm saying. Usually I say, you need to empathize more. It really shows you that peaceful parenting is an art, not a science. And also I think it shows the benefit of working with someone who can give you an outside perspective. You might be doing exactly what the books or the blogs or the Instagram reels are telling you to do, but it might not be the right thing for that moment. Sometimes it can take another perspective to help you see. That happens so much in our membership and in coaching. If you're interested in either the membership or coaching, go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com. You will find the link there to book a free short consult if you would like to do some coaching. You'll also find a page about our membership. Our membership is open currently for new members, and it is just such a wonderful corner of the internet. And we do drop in coaching twice a week inside the membership. And as I was saying, sometimes you just need an outside person to get some eyeballs or ears in this case on what's going on for you, to be able to connect the dots and see what you might do differently. And that's really where getting that expert support is really helpful. And also, honestly, sometimes other members in our group are able to help with that outside perspective. Again, you can go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com for all of that information. Okay, let's meet Charlotte. And as I said, stick around to the end and see how it went after she tried some of the things we talked about. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And for us, this is a reacquaintance because I coached you. We did a few sessions of coaching a few years ago when your now 4-year-old was a baby. So it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everyone just a little bit about who you are and your kids?
Yeah, so my husband and I have 3 kids. Luca is 7, Milo is 4, he'll be 5 in a couple weeks, and Alia is 3. So my younger 2 are just about 20 months apart. They're pretty
Well,
close
that's
in age.
busy.
Yeah,
Well, you have what I have, which is boy, girl, which is fun.
it's lovely.
Okay, so how can I support you today?
So just a couple of things. So I've been doing or practicing peaceful parenting since my oldest was a baby. So really the whole way through, I'm so glad I found it early. But I find myself as we hit different stages, just different challenges pop up. And I'm always just working on being better, more regulated, and it's constant practice. I'm really not that great, even though I've been doing it for 7 years. So I guess the first thing is that I'd really like to understand how to effectively limit behavior while allowing feeling. We're really at this stage with my kids where we've been doing peaceful parenting since the start. So I feel like they're really comfortable expressing a lot. And my older 2 especially can be really sort of violent with tantrums. Even my 7-year-old, who is such an amazing kid, so emotionally mature for his age, when he gets into rages, which is getting less frequent now he's older. It's really violent. Like he lashes out physically and he really, screams red in the face, like the whole thing. And I would just love for him not to be hitting and kicking and, the aggression, like the physical aggression, I suppose, is the hard bit. But maybe that's okay. Like, this is where I kind of get confused because I don't want to stop the feeling, but I really don't understand how to help him with the behavior. And it's the same for my middle child. He does a lot of throwing when he's mad. He'll just pick up the nearest thing, like not a glass. Like he will deliberately not do anything that's too terrible. But magnetiles, the toys, like something that's hard, he will throw it. So like that's the first thing. And I guess I'll stop there just in case you have thoughts.
Okay, well, why don't you tell me the second thing and then we'll see how we're going to tackle it.
Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is totally related, is that sometimes I'm just so tapped with the three of them, often two of them melting down, maybe even at the same time, or tag teaming, especially the two little ones. And, it doesn't happen lightly in my home. Like it takes quite a lot to get me to a point where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It's usually after a long run of listening to feelings, repeatedly engaging in behaviors that I ask so many times that they don't do, kind of calm me and over time, like a really reasonable request. Like, well, for example, this past week, they've just been really obsessed with this new chalk that we got, and they've been making our whole yard into like an Easter canvas of pastel chalk, and they know the one line is, please just don't chalk on the furniture. Like it's so hard to get it off the cushion stuff. And I'm always asking myself if the limit is reasonable. And I always think of like the nail clippers door that you told, well, and I'm like, oh, like, is this really a decent limit? It really does feel reasonable to me. I thought about it. But like my 3-year-old, who is 3, granted, like I've asked her so many times, I'm like, we're not going to chalk on the furniture. And I bring her and I clean it up as quick as I can because it really does seep. And like, yesterday after like day 5, like, please don't chalk on the furniture. She took wet chalk and like all over the couch. And, and
Is it just her who's writing on the furniture?
She's the one that's been struggling. Yeah, she's the one that's like, the other two will listen and they're a little older.
Yeah.
He's the one that like is, in this case, the repeat.
Right.
And I suppose, and this is just an example,
Yeah.
but it's like all these behaviors that I'm like, okay, I've asked you so many times. And then I'm like, I'm cool for so long. And then somebody knocks over a glass of milk and I lose.
Right.
It's like, that's pushed me over the edge. And looking back, I'm like, what could I have done differently? And I'm just really trying to, I suppose, like understand how to change my mindset, or, even just when I'm feeling that tapped, what can I really do beyond like the, I take a time out for myself. I'll even in the same room as the kids, and do the deep breathing, and I try to like self-regulate as best I can. But sometimes once I've hit that point, I just like I can't.
Well, it might be okay. We'll start there and then we'll back up. So it might be that deep breathing just isn't enough for you to reset your nervous system. So you might have to experiment with some other things that you can do to reset the nervous system. And I wonder if, and also to empty your backpack, your emotional backpack. For anyone who's new to hearing about the emotional backpack, it's basically, I'll try to keep it short. It's a metaphor that my mentor, Dr. Laura Markham, came up with. It's a metaphor for the body. And it's when we're holding on to feelings and tensions and stresses in our body and we're not expressing them in the moment, we just stuff them in our emotional backpack. So for you, it would be like the tensions and stresses of keeping it together when people are writing on the furniture or, whatever. And then you said that's how you described it. You said you're good and you're good and you're good. And then you just, you lose it over a glass of spilled milk. So it may be finding ways to process, like when you are like, when you do have that sensation of like, okay, that's another one that I've managed to stay calm for. Maybe instead of just like moving on, you find a way to like release some of that out of your emotional backpack instead of just keeping going and like gritting, bearing down and like, okay, or just going to keep going. It's almost bedtime. Maybe you need to when you do take that time out, I don't know how easy it is for you to cry, but like crying is such a effective way at emptying our emotional backpack. Or maybe it's like, doing some jumping jacks or, experiment with some things that you can do to try to release some of that stuff out of your backpack. That maybe that breathing just doesn't do it. So I don't know if you've experimented with anything else.
Yeah, I've occasionally screamed into a pillow, which is oddly
Yeah, great. Something like that.
I feel kind of strange doing it, and I can like crying does come sometimes, especially when I've acted in a way that I don't feel proud of. But then I don't want to like do it in front of the kid necessarily, or sometimes when I do, I feel like they're like,
Well, one thing I haven't mentioned is laughter. Maybe like getting some belly laughs going with the kids, just sort of because laughter, tears, physical exertion, physical affection, those are some of the ways that you can release things out of your emotional backpack and reset your nervous system. Another thing I heard
mm,
recently was putting your face in a bowl of ice water for like a couple of repetitions for as long as you can stand it. Another thing I've heard is putting a cold pack on the back of your neck. So maybe you could try in between this call and our check-in, try and experiment with trying some of those things and see how they work. Just even like, as I mentioned, jumping jacks, just something for a couple of minutes to get your heart rate up and see if that helps to reset your nervous system. Because I think what's happening is you're just getting you're just getting further and further towards a mother meltdown. And that at a certain point, it's just like, that's it, and it just takes one little thing to set you off.
totally, yeah, yeah. And I love the ice water thing. That feels like it would be a really good reset, and also like a little bit
Yeah.
funny in a
Yeah.
way. That you're
I'm just
doing the
soaking my
thing.
head,
Um,
kids. It's an old expression, right?
it's
Isn't it? Go soak your head. I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm just making that up. Okay,
cool.
so
Love that.
so I think that's something that you can work on is how can you actually
Yeah.
properly reset and deep breathing. Okay, deep breathing is great for like, how do I get enough of a pause in the moment to respond in a different way? But deep breathing for most people isn't going to reset your nervous system back to regulated. You need to do something else.
That makes so much sense. I kind of feel like I want it to be this magic pill, and I've tried to kind of engage with it, but you're right. Like it doesn't actually really help me reset once I'm that
Yeah,
far down
it's
the
a
line. It just
pause.
doesn't.
It's a pause so that
Yeah.
you can like stop and be a little bit more intentional, but it's not a nervous
Yeah.
system reset.
Right. Yeah. I definitely see that. I actually got in my head as you were talking too about like, the laughter and maybe just like adopting a silly character
Yeah,
thing, like being really like overly
I love
goofy and
that.
not
The
really
character thing
myself.
is so good. Like that is such a
Yeah.
good it's such a good thing to practice if that's something that seems attractive to you. Corey, who works
Yeah.
with me, she has different characters that go through the day. Like she's got the dental hygienist that brushes their teeth and the bus driver that gets them out the door in the morning. So she puts on these different character voices where when she's doing different things. And that's more for sort of moving through the schedule. But I think you could have like a toddler alter ego or something where pretend to be a toddler and throw your own sort of tantrum and get yourself laughing and everyone else laughing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Okay,
Okay, and
that's a
then
good idea.
I know it was just an example that your daughter, not listening in terms of the drawing on the with chalk on the patio furniture. However, I'm going to talk about it because you might find that this comes into play in more than just that situation. With a 3-year-old, you actually have to be there to enforce the limit that you've set. It's just not age appropriate. Even your 4-year-old, it's impressive that he can do it because even with a 4-year-old, once they get going, whether they're just engrossed or upset or excited, it's so hard for them to have impulse control. So it might be that, unfortunate as it is, she might only be allowed to use the chalk when you are there to supervise.
Mm,
And that you have to decide if that's worth it to you, to make sure that the couch furniture doesn't get, or the couch cushions don't get written on with chalk, or the inconvenience of having to be out in the backyard and keeping an eye on her. But you might want to
right.
think about, are there other situations where I get frustrated because I've set a limit that is difficult to impossible for them to follow?
Totally. And what's interesting too, Sarah, is like when they're in the throes of a tantrum, or like, I mean, I can't count the number of times I reminded my 4-year-old not to throw things when he's mad.
Mhm.
I totally get that. What I find harder, I think, is, and it's not logical, of course, because it's not logical, but like she's not dysregulated or she's not like showing any signs of, being anything other than
Yeah.
normal. And she just goes,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that it's just too hard to remember when you're engrossed in that activity and it's just so like, it would kind of be like, would you expect if you had a bowl of candy on the counter or, on the coffee table in the living room and you left the room, you probably wouldn't expect that she'd be able to not have the candy when you left the room.
True.
It's a similar
Yes.
kind of thing. Like what I want is so in my face and what, the rule is like behind me going blah, blah, blah. But what I want is stronger than what I'm remembering about the rule.
100%. Yeah, it does. I mean, of course, it does make sense. And again, because I've just been listening to you for so long, like I know in my head that's logic, and somehow it's still very tricky.
Well,
Which is just like
I mean, it may
you would just word right
maybe
places.
because there are things that she does that you do ask her to do that she does manage not to do. It may be because it's so fluctuates, right? Like sometimes kids you can say, don't do this. And because it's not inherently something that they're super motivated to do, they're they're able to not do it, you know? Like that
Right.
it fluctuates. So it may feel like, she can manage to not do this other thing that I asked her not to do, but she can't manage to not draw on the patio furniture. And that's when
Right.
we want to come back to what discipline actually means. It's guidance, right? It's teaching. Like that's what discipline actually is. And so in this case, the quote discipline that she needs is for you to be her external discipline and reminder that the chalk stays on the sidewalk or the trees or wherever she's allowed to write on.
Right, right, yeah. And the other thing, the other piece of that specific example, and this is also typical of my 3-year-old, is that I'll be like, "Oh, no," "still gonna move away." And then she's like, "Oh, this is funny, let's go do it over here," and she'll run around with it and just, like, be a little jokey, which again, like, some circumstances, I can handle it.
Mhm.
For whatever reason, I'm having a really hard time with this one.
Right. With the 3-year-old or that example?
With your
Yeah, yeah.
3-year-old, yeah, when she just gets really cheeky, and she's like, "Oh, if I can't do it over here, I'm gonna go do it
Yeah, well,
there,
then
and I'm gonna run away from
and
you."
you could totally lean into that and get really playful and, you know, redirect her to something that's more that's playful and also more in line with what you find acceptable.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever you do,
Sure.
this is a perfect time for that fake reverse psychology. Whatever you don't draw with your chalk on this thing, something
Right.
that's near you, I'm going to turn around and I don't want to find you over here, and sometimes people will say, oh, you shouldn't use reverse psychology, but I'm talking about fake reverse psychology where everyone knows it's a joke, right? So that might be the perfect time to redirect her by using a fake challenge like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I really like that, and I'm kind of hopeful that also talking about some of these specific triggers, I can just be like, "Oh, yeah, we talked about this. This is not that big of a deal," and just reminding myself of that because it's so funny what sends me over the edge. Like, it's not just it seems like random almost. Like, some of the bigger things I can totally handle,
Uh-huh.
and then sometimes the little things and just, oh my gosh, like, truly, like, whenever I give my children a glass of milk, I know they will spill it. Like, things like that. It's like, it's not even it's so classic,
Yeah.
I'm just like, "Oh my gosh," after the 3rd spill.
Well, I
Can
mean,
you just
maybe
not
this is obvious, but you can give them water, which is easier to clean up, or you could put the milk in like a sippy cup that if it tips over, it won't spill.
I always think like, why am I even bothered by that? Like, it just seems so random to me
Yeah.
that it's like these things, and yet I can sit through an hour-long tantrum. For the most part, calm, like trying to help, and I don't know, it's so interesting.
All
Anyway.
right. Well, do you want to shift to the tantrums and that you were talking about for your older child that you talked about in the beginning?
Yeah, so my older and my middle, and I guess I have like a few kind of specific questions, but like I said at the beginning, the general violence of the tantrums is really hard for me, not in the sense that I can't handle it in the moment. I just don't feel like I'm doing enough to coach them
Okay.
differently. And I wonder if empathizing isn't enough, and after, they know, of course they know we don't hurt each other, we don't hurt our home. They know this. But for whatever reason, it just has not translated into like easier going tantrums or anything. And maybe that's again an unrealistic expectation. I'm not sure. I want to know that I'm doing enough, I suppose, is the thing.
Okay. So what are you doing when there's a meltdown? I mean, first of all, there's sort of two levels to look at this on, how you got there and what you do in the moment. Do you think there's anything worth discussing about how you got there, or do you want to focus more on, I mean, because I think that is an important thing to consider is, how do we get into the spots? I know in the stuff that you wrote to me beforehand, you wondered if maybe you weren't giving enough opportunities for, we'll just say, backpack emptying in the tantrums so that things like, or meltdowns, so that things got you. It sounds like you were wondering if your child was getting a full backpack or your two older kids were getting full backpacks, and that was what was leading to the big meltdowns.
Yeah, I worried that because of the way, especially our morning schedule is like a little tight, it doesn't really allow a ton of time for them to express. And, in the afternoons, we do have long stretches often, because I pick them up from school about 2:50, and sometimes they might have an activity, but we try and keep it to a minimum, so there is time. But then also in some ways, like, I don't know. It's almost like it's not going to be this great big thing. I don't know how I'm contributing, but I do feel like there's something in the sense of like, am I just kind of shutting it down too soon when it's just like this little thing? Or am I not allowing them the space they need at an inconvenient time of day, like bedtime or before school, to, to release some of that, which honestly is usually when these things pop up,
Well, what
right?
about laughter? Because, the main ways that kids empty their emotional backpack are through tears and laughter. So,
Right.
it could be that, as you said, you're worried that you're not allowing space for the tears at the little times or when it's inconvenient. But also, what about consciously trying to schedule in some laughter time every day to try to, get some of the top level of feelings out of the backpack so it doesn't build up quite so much?
That's great, and they love being
Yeah,
chased, like, around the house.
great.
Chasing them around the house is really good for
That's
that.
fantastic. So I wonder if you can
Yeah,
have chase time be part of your routines.
yeah, yeah, that's really good, and I like that too, it's fun for everyone.
Yeah, and it could be a way that, in the morning, you're like, okay, if we all get ready, we'll have, 5 minutes or 10 minutes to play our, monster chase game or whatever it is that you do with chasing them.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a great way to transition out as well the house. And
Yeah, and you can chase them out to the sidewalk or whatever.
right, yeah, yeah, no, I love that, having it be part of the routine.
The
Yeah,
the other thing that I want to say, and tell me if this resonates at all. I think that we can, okay, this is going to sound really weird coming from a peaceful parenting coach, but I think that we can err on the side of giving too much airtime, space, importance to our kids' feelings sometimes, to the point where it's sending a message that they're emergencies. I don't know if you saw, I don't know if you're on my newsletter list, but I sent an email 5 weeks ago, maybe, about having a nonchalant attitude where it comes to big feelings.
yeah,
So I don't know if this is like resonating for you at all. That I wonder sometimes in the service of welcoming feelings, parents may take it a little bit too far in that direction and make too much space. I'll give you an example. My daughter, still to this day, she's 17, but still to this day, she gets kind of like a nighttime, she'll have like big nighttime feelings and nighttime tears about things. And when she was younger, I realized that if I didn't shut it down, she would just get herself so spun out and wound up with her own feelings that it would be really hard to
mhm,
settle and go to sleep. And
yeah,
so I would say, you know what, this is so funny. I'm feeling so weird saying this as a welcoming feelings, peaceful parenting coach. But I would say, like, that's enough for tonight. Like, we can talk about this more tomorrow. I think, it's just the best thing right now is to go to sleep. I mean, it's easy for nighttime to say that, but it might be that when one of your kids is having a meltdown, you say, you know what, that's enough for right now. If we can come back to this, like, let's go read a story or let's, do some sort of like diversion. And to be
mm,
clear, for anyone who's not super familiar with this, I'm not saying that we always try to distract our children when they're having big feelings, but sometimes when you get upset, then you get upset about being upset and it can just kind of spin out of control. So I wonder if there's an intervention point where, you're not that I would ever withdraw empathy, but that I wonder if less leaning into the feelings might be helpful.
yeah, I do feel that, and that's it's funny, Sarah, because when I've had enough. That's usually when my husband will come in and do the very non-peaceful parenting.
Mhm.
And like he's completely on board,
Mhm.
right? He just has a much harder time with the actual process of regulation. And he'll come in and like yell at Luca and the tantrum's over,
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, why? Maybe it doesn't take yelling, but I'm always like, why does it take yelling? Why does it take like having to shut it down that way to make it stop? Have done it that way is because then he's able to, like, he snaps out of it and then he cries and comes
Right.
and I'm still a good cop, like in the
Yeah.
situation, which is not ideal because like neither of us are trying to yell particularly, right? And I'm not a natural yeller, like I'm much more of a freeze person. But yeah, like the interruption, I would love to be able to do that in a way that feels more respectful, a little more gentle, but also I am done
Mhm.
at some point. Yeah.
Well, so you said that he stops and he starts to cry. So he's not crying before this?
Sometimes he
Yeah.
is, yeah, but it's a different quality. It's like anger
Yeah.
tears, like he actually gets to tears fairly easily. And especially if I'm really like connecting to his upset, which like sometimes depending on what it is, like I'm on the verge of tears,
Mhm.
because I really feel how sad he is. Like it's real empathy. And then he does to the sad tears a lot quicker.
Mhm.
But getting through all the junk of the anger, I struggle much more in general. Like I don't have a problem with the sadness or even, like being with it. But the anger is really hard for me. Like it's really hard for me to empathize with in like a more genuine way. So I think part of it is maybe they're not 100% getting what they need from me either. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just spinning myself out and
You
overthinking
might be
it. But
overthinking it a little bit.
yeah, probably. And maybe it's also one of the things of like, again, I feel like I've just done this for so many years. And at this point, I feel like in my head, I should be better or I should be more honed in or dialed in to like some
Well,
of
it sounds
the,
like you're really dialed into being there and being empathetic to your child. And maybe you're joining the okay. So empathy is joining somebody in their feelings, right? But maybe that's not what's called for in every situation because maybe you aren't being enough of an anchor of someone who is a little more nonchalant, a little more grounded in not being upset.
yeah, I could totally see that. I wonder if when like some of the more aggressive things begin with my older child, whether I can just be like, I hear you, I'm going to finish this and then we're going to, or
Yeah.
something.
And it's not just because you're English that I'm going to say this, but I love Mary Poppins as a role model, like the original, like Julie Andrews, Mary Poppins,
Yeah.
who she was very like warm and kind, but also had like a very like no nonsense sort of attitude about her. Did you ever watch that movie?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Multiple times.
So maybe you could channel Mary Poppins when when Luke is having a meltdown and keep like maybe what's called for here is a level of detachment.
Yeah.
How's that landing for you? Like it's in a lot of ways it's opposite of the kind of advice that I usually give people. As usually I'm saying lean in more, find more in your heart, but I wonder if maybe that's not giving Luca enough of an anchor to come back to regulation.
Yeah. It really is. The cogs are working. It feels like that great next step for me to try.
Mhm.
And I wonder what it looks like or how I then behave,
Mhm.
without wanting to be cold,
Yeah.
but just being more fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing, we just had Tasha Shore, who's an aggression expert. We just had her in our membership. And, she always, and I talk about this too, but she really brought home to us how much getting playful when somebody is aggressive can be helpful. I'm not sure if that's anything you've tried with Luca.
Mm. No, again, like the cogs are working. It's so great. I love the ideas because then I'm like, oh, can you imagine if I was like, trying to like cover my face, like, don't get me, but like really hamming it
Yeah,
up
ham it
or
up. And
something like
one
that.
line that Tasha always uses is like, little children who do this get this. Like little children who throw things get a big giant bear hug. So trying
Mm,
to diffuse the situation with a little bit of playfulness, that you could try that, see if that happens, see if that
yeah,
helps.
that sounds really good.
What are
Yeah. And
what are
then,
some ways that, you talked about your husband coming in with a little bit more of a heavy-handed nipping it in the bud that didn't feel good. But I wonder, can you think of any ways that you could do that? Say that meltdown has gone on for a while and it's not feeling like productive anymore, because that's kind of what it sounds like, that it doesn't really feel productive after a certain point. And by productive, I mean backpack emptying, helping someone get the feelings out. Like, you mentioned that they can be very long. And so I just wonder if at a certain point we've crossed from productive into that dysregulated because you're dysregulated, how I talked about with my daughter, how I just say like, that's enough for right now. Can you think of any interventions that you might be able to do that feel more peaceful to you?
It relates to being playful, but I almost like the idea of being able to say like do a big clap or something, be like, oh, I just remembered something really important we have to do, and have it be
Yes.
something like a little ridiculous, right? Or
Yeah.
like
I love
something,
that.
or something he'd enjoy,
I love
or
that.
like yeah, come up with an idea that would be like, oh, like we never, put that orange peel in the trash,
Yeah.
something ridiculous, or it could be something like he enjoys, like, oh, we never finished building your Lego thing, or
Or
something.
even something like, let's read a like let's put a pin in this and read a chapter of the chapter book that we've got going, or something like that. Even if it doesn't even
Yeah.
have to be a playful, silly thing interruption, which would also, I think having a few things you can try would be good, but it doesn't even have to be a playful, silly thing, but just like, let's just change the channel on this for a little bit and see.
Yeah.
So I think I had a client once who asked me like the loveliest, like really attuned question. He was talking about I think he was a 2.5, almost 3-year-old, and how, they tend to have a lot of meltdowns that age. And he said, sometimes I can get him, he loves cars, like he loves Matchbox cars. And sometimes I can get him to stop crying by saying like, let's go in the basement and play with your Matchbox cars. And he said, but I feel almost like I'm tricking him. Like, is it okay to do that? And I just thought that's such a
Mm.
lovely, like, he was pretty new to peaceful parenting, and it was such a lovely, it was so lovely that he was thinking about that. Like, do I just like let him cry and, empty the backpack? Or is it okay to say, like, let's go play with Matchbox cars in the basement? And I was thinking about, okay, if you're an adult and you have a friend that's really sad about something, and like, they their girlfriend broke up with them or something, and you go over to their house and they're just like crying and crying. At a certain point, do you say like, "Hey, let's go for a walk," or like, "Let's go get a coffee?" Like there is a line where you're just like, "This person needs some shifting." And I think that that is the equivalent of like, let's go play with your Matchbox cars. Like, of course, you want to let the person cry and listen and all of that. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, let's move on a little bit. Let's change the channel here.
Oh, yes. And it would be so great to get to that point before I get to the other point, to just be like way before I'm feeling like, oh, I'm just
Mhm.
because then I end up going to a place that's not helpful anyway.
Mhm.
And then well, in my head, I'm like, oh, did I just undo that really good 40 minutes of work I just did? Maybe
Yeah.
I just lost.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be better to just interrupt it in a way that feels more centered? 100%.
It's also okay
That
to put a door or something else between yourself and a child who's throwing things or being aggressive.
right.
It's not, and I know a lot of us who are really following peaceful parenting feel like that's abandonment, but also at a certain point, like you do need to keep everyone safe. And, if it's something that you feel like, I'm going to step outside while you're throwing things, or not outside, but I'm going to be right outside your door. I'm going to be right here and I'll check on you in a minute. Like, I don't know if that would ever feel like something that you need to do or wanted to do.
So my 7-year-old doesn't generally throw things, but my 4-year-old does always. And with him, I hold him. I hold his arms
Yes.
so he
Yes,
can't.
that is the appropriate thing for him. I was thinking more of 7-year-old that you probably don't wanna
Yeah.
try to physically
Exactly.
unless he's really small or you're really big.
100%. No, he's pretty big. Yeah. With Milo, my almost 5-year-old now, he will try and bite me. He'll try all the
Mhm.
things, but like he doesn't really want to land a bite, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like if he ever got my skin, he wouldn't really go for
Right.
it. But he's always like, he's snapping
Yeah.
his teeth around and he's throwing and I have him in a hole. I have both his arms and like only do it when I'm
Yeah,
calm,
yeah,
right? If I start getting angry, I gotta let him
yeah,
go.
yeah, and that's good.
Because otherwise it becomes
That's a
like,
rule, but I wanna mention that for everybody else, is never touch a child if you're angry. That
yeah.
is a good rule of thumb. Even if there's gonna be some destruction if you leave them, better to walk away if you're feeling angry than touch a child or try to hold them if you are angry. So even if something might get broken, better the, the lamp than something else that might be worse. But if you can, if you're not angry and you can hold him and you can, grab his hand when he's about to throw something, that's great. And often with a small child, that physical envelopment can help them get to the tears that, feeling
Mm.
like held, it can help them get to the tears and really release some of that emotion.
Yeah, yeah. And I do see that with him. Like he really does he's more easily frustrated. So it happens more frequently, but it's not as intense as with my old son. And then like my 3-year-old, if I'm holding Milo will say, Alia, help, and she's like, let go of my brother. And she tries to like grab him away from me, or she'll start like
Well, you
kissing
could
my
totally get
leg.
playful in that instance. You could say something like, "What? Am I a big purple snowman who's trying to hold your brother and you're trying to save him? Oh, rescue him, rescue him." And I bet you could get them both laughing.
Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
That's good because that's another scenario where I'm just like, my kids are ganging up on me.
Well,
What is
invite
happening?
them to gang up on you in a playful way when that happens.
Yeah.
And you can say
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I'm gonna let go of him, and then I'm gonna see if I can catch you both, and then, get them to run away. The big purple snow I don't know where purple snowman just came from, but the big purple snowman is gonna get you. Run, run," and see if you can just I bet that would flip a switch.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try that the next time that happens reasonably frequently. That's great.
So I think though, going back to what does Luca's aggression look like then? He said he doesn't typically throw things.
No, he will be like, I can tell from a mile away it's about to happen. Like, for example, last week he came in from school and he was like, I gave him a snack. And he went, Mommy, this is not the snack that I wanted, and then he'll just be like really overly angry about it. And I'm like, oh, it's beginning. It kind of starts with him yelling at me or picking a fight with me. Or he'll ask for something he knows I'm going to say no to, like TV or something in the week, right? And he'll be like, yeah, you can have that at the weekend, and just do my usual response, knowing what's coming. And then he'll be like, oh, and he'll be really angry. He gets there real fast, like just really angry and starts screaming and yelling. And then when I'll come in a little closer and just be like, hey, like, do you want to come do this with me? No, I don't. And then he'll start to like lay down. Maybe he might kick my ankles, try and like provoke me physically a little bit. And when he was a little bit younger, I stopped doing this, but I used to sit on him to restrain him because he was so strong. I remember at one point being like, this is probably 2 years ago. I was like, I'm not going to be doing that with you. I'm going to try something different. And I haven't done it since, but he's like, remember, mommy, you're not allowed to sit on me, and then he'll like start trying to like kick me crazy with his legs or
What
something.
happens when
As
you
I'm
move
like,
away?
it depends. Like often he'll follow me, not necessarily to hit me, or he'll like throw a cushion at me, or like something that's not hard. Like he just trying to I don't know. Sometimes I think he just wants to get a response so that he can just let it out. So I'll be like, no, we're not going to be doing this. I'm moving it away, or I'm kind of staying
Right.
close, but not too close.
So I wonder if you
Um,
would also experiment with maybe moving away a bit and just, I want to help you with your feelings. If you are trying to throw things at me, I'm gonna go in here or I'm gonna go over here, and just maybe just
yeah.
experiment with that. The other thing I was gonna say is if you can see it coming, what about just like calling out the elephant in the room and say, wow, did something happen at school today? Seems like you kind of maybe had a rough day. I don't know if you've tried that. Like, if you can
Mm.
see something, he's getting old enough that you might be able to talk to him and say, ask him what's going on.
Yeah, and I have done that, and he'll be like, "Nothing happened, nothing happened here," or like he's kind of mad about the question. And I actually guess I haven't tried for a little while because I felt like he was getting angrier, but maybe he just wanted to get angry. And I think he gets into a place where like he doesn't really want to calm down.
Right.
And I can relate to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I don't want to calm down either when I'm really angry. Like, you're indulging in being angry and like you hope you can regulate because you're an adult. But I think that
Okay.
with
Sorry.
him, he's like,
Sorry. We just had like a connectivity problem. So after you said he doesn't want to calm down, it'll be on the recording, but I didn't hear what you said. So maybe we could just start
Oh,
again.
sure. Yeah, I feel like he doesn't want to calm down, which is something I can relate. What that feels like when you're in the throes of anger and it almost feels good to remain there. He, like gets into the space of, I feel like, and this is where I feel like I'm not doing enough of the coaching because he's like in this space of anger, unable to grasp anything that would help him to center
Right.
again.
Have you ever talked to him about it outside of these points?
Not meaningfully.
Yeah.
Beyond, that in our home,
Yeah, that's gonna
we
when
didn't
that
do it
yeah,
right.
it's not an
No, it
information gap.
hasn't done any.
Yeah. It's not an information gap. What about talking to him about it and say, I've noticed that blah, 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 and I'm wondering if you have any ideas of what might help you when you've got a lot inside your body that wants to come out, and just ask him, like, if you have any ideas of what might help you. The other thing is I realized that one thing that we haven't talked about is another way that I sometimes tell people to help their kids when they're in this mood is by re-engaging the prefrontal cortex, by asking him to rate his problem. Like, so if he's picking a fight with you and you don't have the right kind of snack, and just be like, "Oh, I see how frustrating that is for you. Is it like a 1 or a 10? Like, how's this feeling for you right now?" And asking him to rate it. And I mean, that can help with kids learning perspective, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about asking him to think about his problem to try to re-engage his prefrontal cortex. Or, is that I'm holding for people who can't see us, like, is that like a small problem or is it like a huge problem? And not in a condescending way so that he's like, oh, it's a small problem, but just like in a way to like add another dimension to trying to get him to express himself instead of just getting angry with you.
Yeah, I've not tried anything like that.
Another thing that's similar, that's sort of straddles that idea plus the playfulness, is like a version of would you rather? Like, is it worse than, not having the kind of snack you want? What's worse, that or if an alligator bit your bum or something like something silly, So
Yeah.
maybe just seeing if you can kind of change the direction of the flow by asking like a would you rather question, or it's same thing of asking the rating the problem or how big is the problem.
He loves the Would You Rather game. We play that in general. So I think that would be really fun.
And it could be like the
I would
which is
definitely
worse, like whatever the problem is.
which is
Yeah.
worse,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, which is worse. Which again, I can see us playing outside of angry times as well. He would love something like that.
So one thing that my friend
Yeah.
Dana Abraham talks about is if we only use these strategies when a child is angry, then they learn to associate it with when they're angry. So definitely, I love the idea of doing it outside of the times too. And she also talks about this in terms of talking about feelings. Like if the only time that we're like, I can see how upset you are, is the only time we're noticing a feeling is when they're upset, then that's going to like kind of, it almost like makes the neural pathway stronger. So you could also talk about, oh, like, wow, I can see how happy you are about things, or I can see how excited you are. So try that as well. That could be all of these last things I think fit into coaching, the coaching category that you were wondering if you need a little bit more focus on.
Yeah, I really like those. And they're fresh ideas for me as well that I haven't tried. So that I think that's so great. And there's probably a part of me that's like, oh, he clearly needs this, right? Which I probably need to shed a bit, kind of like you were talking about. You don't have to always fully engage in what's
Yeah.
happening, like or get into the feelings. Cause I'm just like, oh, he must
Yeah.
need this melt. He must need this somehow.
Well, and we do, and just to be
Maybe-
clear, everybody does need a emptying of their emotional backpack. But I do think sometimes as I said, it crosses from being productive to just being upset about being upset. And it's like a snowball, like it's a snowball rolling down the hill and just getting huge instead of, you know, stopping when it needs to stop.
Right. Yeah. I could totally see that. So yeah, there's a little bit for me, like I've got nuance in my mind to work out of how to kind of execute, but I love the idea.
All right. Well, you've got a lot of things to try. So we will check back in a couple of weeks and see how it all went.
Thank you. That sounds
Thanks,
great.
Charlotte. Hello, Charlotte. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I think it's been about 3 weeks since we talked last time. So, how have things been?
Well, I did get to try quite a few of the suggestions that you made during the last call. So some have been really great. So we've been building like chasing the kids into our morning routine, and has been such a game changer with getting them out the door. Cause then, I'll chase them around. I'll put on Blondie, one way or another, I'm going to get you, and then we chase for the length of the song. And that's worked really well because it keeps it like contained, and then I'll chase them out the door, That's been really fun. They really love that. And it was really easy. So that was great. And then I've also been trying it's funny because I've been trying different tactics with, when they're kind of going on like a longer meltdown, or even just to make the meltdown not happen in such a dramatic way with playfulness. And it's stuff I kind of knew about, but what I noticed during this process has been that playfulness works brilliantly, especially with Milo, my now 5-year-old. He loves it. As soon as I get playful, he just turns everything around. It's so cool and it's so instant. But what I noticed is sometimes regulating myself actually is the problem when I'm already triggered. So I was like, oh, I know this works, but I can't always get there. I can't always get to playful depending on how far gone we are. So that was kind of an interesting observation.
Yeah,
Actually.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's really interesting that you're noticing that you're actually the limiting factor in using playfulness. And is it because you are feeling angry that you don't want to be playful? Or what do you mean that you find that you're too far gone? What does that look like? Or what's
Yeah.
causing?
So I suppose it's more that I'm actually quite a patient person, but I'm not that good at self-regulation once I'm beyond patience. And I kind of knew that, but it's, on the day where I haven't slept well, or I'm otherwise just not taken care of, and I know how important that is, but I don't always get to sleep well. And, it really impacts how I show up. Then I'm less inclined to want to be playful, even though I know it's really effective. Whereas the days where I do feel rested, or I do feel more resourced, or, things are going quite well, I'm happy to do it. I know it's going to be great and it works. So, but I guess I didn't really realize the extent to which I was bringing that. So I was trying to be more mindful of actually using tools
Right.
during the last few weeks.
And
Yeah.
that's a good thing that you can work on, right? That you can think about and work on.
I never tried the face in the ice bucket thing, which I really still want to. But just other ways of kind of regulating myself, I think that's kind of going to be my focus now that I
Yeah.
realize that a bit more.
Okay. Well, you can try some of those strategies that you didn't get a chance to that we talked about last time. And also, I think I said this before, but it may be that you're letting things go for too long, which is why you're finding it maybe acting a little bit earlier and getting playful earlier on maybe would be helpful, just because once you start going down that road, it is harder to come back, in terms of your own regulation.
Yeah, and it is. And I think what was interesting, and I was reading transcript back from the last time too, because I was just trying to remind myself of that headspace, which changes so frequently. But actually, on those days where I'm less resourced, I just don't want to deal, right? And then I do shut things down too early or too harshly, or, a lot of the time I can sit, but I did also try the things you suggested to help shorten some of the longer ones. It's with my 5-year-old, he doesn't really want to go longer. It's so easy to get him with playfulness to move out of that zone. With Luca, my 7-year-old, playfulness kind of works, but not really. And what I found to be more effective was the appealing to reason piece, or the kind of engaging the prefrontal cortex
Yeah, we
piece.
talked about those strategies of rating his anger and looking for rainbow around the room, those re-engaging the prefrontal cortex.
Right. And I didn't, in the moment I forget. So I'd never actually asked him to kind of rate the problem, even though, again, it's on my list. I want to make sure I try that, because I do think it would work with him, given that what I was doing was kind of engaging him in conversation a bit more, not necessarily about the issue, sometimes, yes, but more just talking to him. And that seemed to help more, to talk to him. And also, with some of the kicking and things like that, just being, I tend to be fairly firm around that, like boundary wise, but just making sure like it's very clear, I do not like this. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
move away from you, which is something
Good.
you suggested.
Yeah.
As I move over here and we can still engage, but I do
Yeah.
not let you kick me, rather than staying close and holding it or something.
Yeah.
So it can work as well.
I'm dying to know before I ask you this question, I just thought of an idea about when you're feeling like not being playful, when you've just kind of you're low resource, you've kind of had it. What if you had like a cranky mom character that like you get to express your like, I've had it, I'm done with it kind of thing, but at the same time you're kind of playful. What if you're like, oh, great, I can feel cranky mom's just showed up here. I don't know. That might be something that you could work with your dysregulation and also be playful at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of love that. It reminded me too of because you had said about like the grumpy toddler character or into characters here and there, right? And I didn't get a chance to play with that either, but I really like that idea because it almost allows me to lean into being cranky, but then just like ham it up,
Yeah. It
Yeah.
might be a little bit, it's like you don't have to act cheerful, like you don't have to act like fun and cheerful. You can be like, have your cranky mom character. Okay. So I've been dying to ask you how, one thing I had suggested last time was maybe I'm just going to use shorthand, being less empathetic to Luca and not leaning into the feelings as much. I thought that maybe that you were going a little bit too far in that direction. Did you play with that at all? And
Yeah.
I don't really mean less empathetic. I'm just using that as a,
Yeah.
that sort of that nonchalant, like this is not as big of a deal.
Yeah. 100%. And it came easy. I was surprised because I'm really used to like leaning in, right? But it was actually kind of a relief to be able to be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, honey. Like, I'm sorry that's happening, and just be like, I'm just going to finish this or I'm just going to do this thing. And like, I'm going to be right there, or just being a bit like, oh yeah, it's fine. Cute was easy to maintain warmth with. And that was like a nuance I was wondering how I would, work. But yeah, it's so freeing to like allow myself to do that rather than be like, oh no, they definitely need this. And like, we talked last time about like, of course they need to unload, right? And that's necessary, but it's not like every little thing needs to be
Right.
like empathized with like, in a big way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And how
Yeah.
did Luca respond to that change?
I actually think well. And again, I was trying to journal as I went so I could remember in the moment because so often like the thing happened and I either forget the tool, which I did like write some things down so I could look at it and remember, or I'm like, oh, was that like a good or a negative, experience? And the couple times I journaled about it, I felt like he did really respond well to it in the sense that like it wasn't prolonged. He was able to kind of snap out of it quicker, I suppose, snap out of it a little bit quicker. And I did have a sense, though, I was like, oh, am I shutting him down? Like, I don't want to like shut him down. But then I was like, no, I'm just like, I'm going to give this a try and just see where it goes. And it did definitely help him to come back to the present, I felt. Like he
Good.
didn't go down the road like he so often did with his meltdowns. So yeah, like the couple times I did that, it was really effective.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm definitely like, and I like the stance as well. I like the stance for myself because, yeah, like I said, it feels a bit more liberating and a bit more like, okay, yeah, I am preparing dinner, whatever it is I'm doing, I'm going to continue to also do, and that was good, really
Well,
good.
and it's really setting the tone of like, this is not an emergency, this is like, I'm here for you. I'm empathetic and, I care about your feelings. And also like, it's not such a, hurricane coming that we have to like batten down the hatches and everything has to stop and drop. And we're going to just focus all of our attention on your feeling. Cause I think that maybe of like that, you're so good at empathizing that maybe it was making him lose the plot.
Sure. Yeah. No, and I do think that was definitely an element of that. And I also was thinking back to like times when it really has been very prolonged, like very prolonged, and how I use that in the moment too. Like before we spoke, even just like other times when it's just really stood out to me. And he doesn't melt down much as he used to. So we've just had like a few instances, probably a kind of bigger one since we spoke. But yeah, I'm definitely going to play more with that as well because I feel like it's
Good.
been effective.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to update me on?
One thing that did come up was, and we talked about this too, was asking my kids what might help in the moment, outside of the moment, like keeping
Mhm.
the how can I help sort of bring you back? Like, what do you think would be useful? And I have like, there's this song, it's Gabby Dollhouse, it's called Just Breathe. My kids really like it. It's a really good one. And Milo suggested putting it on, during, like maybe we can put this on and then we can like, I can hold you and so like he suggested that and we have done like it didn't work like all the times, but
Mhm.
the times I remember to do it, it was great, and I was like, okay, good. So at least we had like one success with that where I was like, okay, I'm gonna put the song on, and then we'll like do this and like hold him. And that was great. And then Lucas said though, he was like, he was basically like, I want you to take me and for us to go and play Magna Tiles, right? And he was essentially asking for one-on-one time. And that's trickier because so often I can't do that. Like I'm alone with the three of them and I can't just take him off to do that, even though I want to. I was like, oh, I don't really want
Yeah.
to do that.
Well, I mean, maybe he has a sense of that he just needs more one-on-one time with you, and you can find a time to do that when your partner's around or the other kids are at a play date, or I don't know when that would be, but maybe that's just a good thing to keep in mind at other times too. I mean, I know you already try to do that. And I love also that you're having conversations about, just tools with them outside of the time. And I think that can continue to evolve.
Right. Yeah. And I do. And again, last time you had said, of course, they know not to kick and hit. Like it's not an information gap. It's not an information gap. But even reminding them outside of the moment of we call it like our house rules, right? And I can't remember if that came from you about having rules that you can say, oh, these are our house rules. And so you're not like, in our home, this is our rule, right? So remember, these are our rules. Like, what are our rules? We talk about,
Mhm.
got like three, basically, is like, don't like no people, property, and kind words. It's like not
Yeah.
that complicated, but just reminding them of that has outside of the moment so that they're the ones that kind of own the knowledge. Because
Great.
I think quite good too. I try
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm on a good path, Sarah, but also definitely got some self work to do on the regulation piece that maybe I wasn't so aware of.
Well, also that there's also room, Charlotte, for nobody has to be a perfect parent. And, maybe there's just compassion for yourself and like, yeah, I was cranky with the kids today and I didn't sleep well last night. And, maybe I'm not saying don't work on it, but I'm also saying maybe you'll never get there and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a work in progress, the compassion piece. I'm quite hard on myself when I'm not my best with the kids.
And there's nobody that's a happy, regulated parent every day. Like,
Right.
really. Like, nobody, I mean, I guess maybe if you have like a staff or something, you could show up as a happy, regulated parent every day if you had somebody who was doing every other single thing you ever needed to do. However, that's not the reality for most people. And there are just going to be days where you're like, yeah, I was cranky today. And, hopefully I'll get a better sleep tonight and I'll be better tomorrow. And that's just life.
Yeah, 100%. I have to remind myself of that a lot. And again, something I know rationally, I don't always feel it rationally. And you don't really want to be that way either, right? It's
Yeah.
to be more real with your kids. So yeah,
I was listening to this memoir that came out this year, recently. This woman who, because of some trauma in her childhood, she had basically chased perfection for her whole life. And at one point, her daughters, who were like, I'm just going to guess, I want to say they were like 9 and 11, sat her down and said, Mom, we don't feel like we know you. We feel like you're just perfect all the time and we don't feel like we know you. And that was sort of the beginning of her awakening of like trying to figure out, what she was running from. But I thought that was pretty wild, that, and I thought about that just in the context of what you're saying. Like we want to be fully human for our kids. And some of that means having cranky days.
100% and allowing that for your kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not that way, and yeah, we try and normalize that too in our house, even though, like I said, like my expectations of myself are a bit ridiculous, but I always never meet them, so it's fine.
Well, maybe you should lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I know listening to this is going to help a lot of other parents too. And hopefully it's helpful for you and it'll continue. Keep me posted about how things go.
Well, and thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all your content. Everything's so wonderful. I always engaged with your stuff. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thanks. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.